When should I start pumping if I'm breastfeeding my baby? This is a tricky, loaded question. It really depends on what you're going to be doing with that milk. There's lots of different ways to pump. It depends on if you're pumping to stash or if you're pumping to replace a breastfeeding. If you're pumping to stash, you can really do that whenever. I usually recommend within 30 minutes of finishing a breastfeeding session, meaning you fed the baby and now you're feeding your pump the dessert milk. You're feeding the milk that your body thinks is going into a cluster feeding baby, and you're not getting too close to when you're wanting to feed the baby again. The issue with pumping too close to when baby wants to eat is the body basically thinks that you've already fed the baby. And so it's still making milk for your baby, but it thinks baby ate and is cluster feeding. So if you're trying to stash, you usually want to try to pump within about 30 minutes of breastfeeding and expect to get anywhere from half an ounce to an ounce combined. If you collect enough of this milk, you can leave that for your baby, and then the expectation would be while you're gone, you would pump to then replace that milk. The other way that you could pump is to pump right before you walk out the door and leave that instead. So let's say your baby breastfed at 7 a.m. and you have a 10 a.m. hair appointment. You could either breastfeed your baby and then pump at 9, walk out the door, leave that milk for your baby, come home and breastfeed. Or you could breastfeed your baby at 7, walk out the door, leave the milk that you had pumped before, and at 10:30 or 11, you could then pump around the same time that baby's feeding, and then come back and breastfeed at 12. And the milk that you pumped while you were gone would then go back into your freezer stash for the next time that you feed or pump. So again, when you're trying to pump to replace a feeding, it really depends on how long are you going to be gone, how many feedings are you missing, do you already have some stash in the freezer? But the most important thing is you need to feed something in order to maintain your milk supply. So if the baby is being fed by a bottle, you should be feeding something, either feeding the baby or feeding your pump. But it doesn't have to necessarily be at the direct time that baby's feeding. There can be a little bit of wiggle room, plus or minus 30 to 45 minutes, either before baby feeds or after baby feeds, just so that you're telling your body, hey, baby's eating, I want to maintain this milk, and also to have that milk for the next time you leave the baby. So it is kind of a loaded question. It depends on why you're pumping the milk, how long you're gone, how many feedings you're gone for, if you do already have a stash or not. But those are the two main ways that I'll teach my patients for how to pump when they're breastfeeding. It could be done first thing in the morning after you breastfeed when milk is at its highest. It could be right before you want to go to bed if baby is sleeping longer, or if baby only takes one side, you could pump the other side for that stash. Now you know.